Hello, everybody. Thanks for spending the time and watching this video. I think it's going to be really insightful for you and your team to get some more of the basics of data literacy and data culture and be able to start implementing some best practices within your business and your brewery to help make you guys more profitable and your day-to-day lives less stressful in the future. So without further ado, let's get into it. All right, so let's dive into the training here. So again, this is key ingredients, data literacy and culture. So we're going to go through a lot of the fundamentals and basics of data literacy and data culture so you understand why that's critical for your business and help you understand how you can use data more in the future. So here's our basic agenda. First, I'll do a quick introduction. We're going to look at the importance of brewery or data in brewery management. Then we're going to do some fundamentals. So we're going to look at the basics of data literacy. We're going to see how we transform raw data into something that's usable in analytics. We'll walk through building a data culture with your team and empowering them to make decisions using data. And then finally, we're going to bring it all together. Okay, so here's a little introduction to data literacy. So I guess when I say data literacy, what do I mean? And it's really the ability to comprehend and utilize data effectively. I don't have to tell people, but data is everywhere around us, right? We see it all the time in our both personal and business lives. It's like every little app, every website you go to, every business you do business with is tracking some data. So since we're tracking all of it, let's find ways to make use of it. And that's really where data literacy comes in. As people master data literacy, especially in breweries, it's going to help them align much better with market demands and it'll drive success and profitability. So I have a couple quotes here that'll help kind of tie this together. The first is, information is the oil of the 21st century, and analytics is the combustion engine. So what that's saying is we have data everywhere, but until you know how to use it the right way, then it's not all that helpful for you. In fact, if it's used in the wrong way, it can be a hindrance. So we really want to show people how to use data the right way. And then another quick quote is, data is a tool for enhancing intuition. So while it's true that a lot of our analytics programs and algorithms and machine learning and stuff can do really good things, behind all of these tools are real people. And data alone can't give you the answers you need. So what we'll be walking through as we go through this is, while you need to have a data and analytics program, you also need to have your people. And it's really the combination of the two that makes everything more powerful and multiplies what the benefits are of having a good data and analytics program. Just a quick background on me. So I'm the owner of Central Coast Analytics. We're just getting started. We're focused on partnering with craft breweries to help deploy analytic solutions to help their performance. But before this business, which I'm just starting, I have 20 years of experience in data and analytics programs in large corporations. So I have quite a bit of experience, and I've thought a lot about these topics that we'll go through today. And as hopefully you'll see, I'm pretty passionate, and I consider myself an expert in data visualization, and we'll be talking through some of that also. Okay, so some of our goals and objectives. So first off, we just want everybody to know the basics. So I know people usually don't want to apply something in their business unless they trust it. And you don't really trust something until you understand it, right? So that's what we want to do today, is give you that basic understanding, and then it'll build up trust, and then you'll be willing to apply it in your business. So once we know the basics, we're going to think how it fits with breweries, and I think it fits extremely well. And by the time you leave this, I think you'll see that also. And as you see the potential of the data analytics in your brewery, I want you to be inspired to use more data-driven decision-making for you and your team in the future. And then undoubtedly, as you use these analytics programs in your team and your business, you're going to be more successful, profitable, and the business life will be less stressful and more enjoyable. So we're going to see benefits really everywhere. Okay, so in this first section, we're going to dive into a little bit more the importance of data in brewery management. So we'll just talk about how there's data everywhere. We'll review a little bit more why it's necessary for brewery leaders to know the basics of data and analytics. And then I'll run through a few kind of real life, using fake examples, stories of breweries who didn't use data and analytics and some problems they found themselves in. Okay, so right now we're really living in a time of digital transformation. Think of all the data related to your brewery and the systems it's in. A lot of times you have point of sale data, you have wholesale data, maybe ERP, brewery management data, financial, social media, email campaign, website traffic, employee, customer survey, supply chain. There's probably more, but that's a good list to start with. So it's really everywhere. And it impacts all parts of our business. So maybe 10 years ago, we were able to get to a little bit of that. But today, with all these new platforms that are out there, we really have access to exponential amount of data. And everything's easier to use and visualize with new tools in place. And so we can, without a whole lot of time or investment of money, we can get to quick, be able to put solutions out there that'll lead you to quick and confident decision making. So there's all these benefits and it's relatively easy to do, but many companies still struggle with putting all their data to work for them. So for those that do, there's a huge strategic advantage because they can really jump on this before others and especially their competition will. So a lot of opportunity out there as we learn more about data and analytics. Okay, so why is it necessary for brewery leaders? Let's walk through a few reasons here. So first is I think a lot of times if somebody doesn't really understand data or they don't use it, you really have nothing else to go off of but your gut feel when it comes to decision making. And I know a lot of the audience knows their business very well. So many times their gut feel is correct just because they know the business so well in the market. But especially these days, really, we shouldn't be solely relying on gut feel or intuition. No matter how well you know your business, additional facts and insights will only be able to add value to your decision making. So another reason why this is important is sometimes people use data without really doing it correctly or understanding what they're doing. And it will potentially cause more damage than a value it will add. Either they'll have errors in their analysis, maybe their data is not timely or it's incomplete. And like I said, it's going to potentially cause problems. So this shouldn't scare you off completely because none of this is rocket science and can certainly be used by everybody. You just need to be aware of the value that comes from using data correctly and make sure you are using it correctly. And then finally, as you've heard in recent conferences you've been to or magazines you look at, websites, maybe talking with your peers in the industry, more and more people are using data to gain insights. So there's going to be a group of people that are left behind, and they're definitely going to be at a competitive disadvantage. So they would be doing a disservice to their team and their business in an increasingly competitive industry. So we want to get you guys up to a good spot so you're comfortable using this information in the future. Okay, so let me walk you through a few examples here. So first, imagine Brewery A, which never invested in data analytics. They brewed their beers, produced their varieties, and waited for sales. One of their beers was selling out quickly, while others were accumulating in stock because demand was low. Maybe without data and analytics, they just continued to produce the same amount of all their beers. But over time, their storage costs increased due to the unsold beers they had on hand. Those eventually became stale. They had to throw them out. And they missed sales on the opportunities for the varieties of beer that were more popular because they didn't have enough on hand. So you can imagine if they had used data analytics, they could have forecasted their demand more accurately for each of their beer types and really optimize their production, which would have reduced that waste and storage and then also maximize their sales because they always had beer on hand to sell their customers. So let me go through another one quickly with pricing strategy. So imagine a brewery who priced their beers just based on intuition and what they thought the market would bear. Over time, though, they found themselves struggling with lower than expected profits, and they couldn't understand why. If they had used some data and analytics, they would have identified the price elasticity of their products. They would have seen that maybe certain beers they can command a higher price, and they would have successfully got that price, and that wouldn't have affected their volume. But maybe there's some others that they really can't get that higher price, and they need to go something super competitive, and they'd be able to increase volume on that beer. The main thing is they would be able to have a good strategy around it and be able to track how effective their strategies are. And that would have led them to maximize their revenue and their profits. Okay, so let's go to another brewery with understanding customer preferences. So let's say this brewery was known for producing maybe traditional ales, and that's all they've ever produced. And over time, they've been pretty successful with that. However, they noticed a steady decrease in their sales, and they weren't sure why. But they only knew to do it one way, so they just continued to brew their beers, hoping sales would eventually pick up. However, if they had used analytics, they would have been able to realize that that decline was not a temporary fluctuation. They would have seen that maybe consumer preference is shifting more towards other, more unique styles. If they were able to test out some different theories using data and seeing what beers were selling more, they could have shifted their brewing patterns. And armed with this insight, they would have adopted their product line to meet changing customer tastes and keeping sales high. And then finally, I'm sure you can imagine a brewery who, and this probably happened to you, where you occasionally faced delays in receiving essential ingredients. When you have those delays, that's going to impact your production schedule. It might lead to a backlog in fulfilling orders, so higher costs and less happy customers. Maybe if you didn't have data analytics, you would have always considered these as one-off incidents and always assumed, well, maybe tomorrow all of our suppliers will get it together and we won't have a problem again. Or you wouldn't realize that it was always the same supplier. But if you do use data and analytics, you can find when it is a reoccurring issue. Maybe a certain supplier is always late. This will help you identify why that is. Then if you're able to identify that problem and address it with that supplier, and maybe you switch to a more reliable supplier, that's going to ensure smoother production and timely order fulfillment. So I went through those pretty quick, but I think everybody can think back at times in their own brewery or with those you've heard of where something really bad was starting to happen and the brewery team just didn't have any visibility on it. So it just compounded and got worse and worse. Where if they were able to catch it right away, they would have an opportunity to turn it around and do some good things. All right, so now we're in section 2. We're going to go through some of the basics of data literacy. So I'll touch on that introduction, but I already introduced it, so we'll move quick through that one. Next, we're going to look at some of the core elements. We're going to talk about some different types of data you might run into, and then some different types of analytics. So again, I already went through this slide, so I'll leave it in the slide deck if you want to refer to it, but I won't spend more time on it right now. So I think there's 4 elements, core elements of data literacy, and they kind of follow a logical progression of skills. So first you start with just reading and a basic understanding of data. So maybe an example of that is you're looking at a trend chart and you're able to understand what it's showing a metric over a certain time period. So just the basics of understanding. Next up would be a deeper level of understanding. So that's when you're able to see what the data represents, if there are any gaps that you should be aware of, and how you can use it in decision making. So maybe an example of this is if you were comparing COVID versus non-COVID years against each other, and you need to come up with an understanding of some of the fundamental differences in demand patterns over time. If you're able to understand the data and what's going on in those different periods of time, you're able to come to those different conclusions correctly. Next, we get to questioning of data, and that's all about critical thinking. So this is now making sure you're comfortable with what is presented and what the data is showing. And then if you're not fully comfortable with it, where should you go dig if you need to get more information? And then finally, we're going to get to communicating data. And that really comes down to helping others make sense of the data in the most clear and logical form for decision making. And that's kind of the highest level of skill set when it comes to understanding data. So first we read it, then we understand it, we question it as needed, and then finally we communicate those insights out to others. Okay, so we have some different types of data. So I think most of these are pretty self-explanatory, but I'll go through them each here. So first we have a set. So that's going to be whatever set of data or group of data we want to analyze. So you can see some different examples there. We can have lots of different sets of data. Next, we have qualitative data. So usually this is a way to describe or characterize our data. So this might be beer families, customer groups, ingredient types, different ways we're going to break our data down. And then finally, we have quantitative. So that's going to be your measures or facts within your data. So these are things you're going to maybe aggregate together or subtract one from the other. Different ways that you're going to get insights from your data. Okay, now we have different types of analysis. So again, this is kind of going from the most basic to what would be the most advanced. So descriptive, so that's just the facts, right? Usually looking back at something historical and showing what happened. When we get into diagnostic, that's going to get a little bit more into kind of the root cause of what happened. So understand the why behind some historical thing that happened in your business. Okay, now we're going to get a little bit more advanced. So predictive is going to be more complex, where we're going to take that historical data and we might add in some other inputs, and we're going to try to model what will happen in the future. So any forecast is never 100% accurate. So it's good to understand these kind of within confidence limits. So we think this might happen. It could be a little higher, it could be a little lower, but at least it's putting us in the right direction. And then as you're doing predictive analytics, it's good to think the further out you go, usually the less accurate it will be. So for example, we're probably able to forecast next week's demand relatively well, but it's hard to forecast 20 weeks out into the future. So the further you go out, probably the less accurate it'll be. And then finally, as we're looking through these, prescriptive. So that's thinking through what the future might look like if we change some of our assumptions or parameters. So maybe this is a what if analysis, and what the question it's trying to answer is, what should we do? So that's getting pretty advanced, where you're trying to use data and models to guide your guys' actions and decision making. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the importance of data visualization. So I do a lot of data visualization. Sorry, sometimes I stumble over that word. But I think it's really critical to taking these large amounts of data and making them usable. So the first benefit we get from it is simplification. So data can often be very complex. It can be huge amounts of it. It can be difficult to understand when you're looking at it just in a table. So like on that visual on the slide, if you're looking at the lower left, that's hard to pick up too many insights from, right? It's just a lot of data. If you really looked at it straight for maybe half an hour, you could pick up some interesting things. But just glancing at it, you really can't tell what's going on. By visualizing it, which you can see an example on the right-hand side of the screen, it's going to make it much easier to digest. And the reason why it's easier to digest is the human eye is really good at picking up on patterns and trends and correlation. So that's what these visual analytics help us do. And that's going to make just everything quicker in understanding the data, much easier to use than if you were just using that raw data. Another thing that's cool about analytics or visual analytics is because it's interesting to look at, and you can kind of lead the audience in what you're trying to show them. It's kind of like storytelling. So you're telling a story with the data. And it's much easier for people to remember than just looking at raw data. so we can highlight important points and make them more memorable. So just think through, if I gave you both the just the data table on the left and that dashboard on the right, if I asked you a few questions such as, what months had the most traffic in this tap room? Or what day of the week are we the busiest? Do we have seasonality in our volume? Or are we normally busier or slower on holidays? I think everyone would agree, using the dashboard on the right, you'd be able to much more quickly and confidently answer those questions than just the data table on the left. So can't stress enough the importance of data visualization as you're trying to use data and analytics in your business. Okay, cool. So now that we know some of the basics of data and analytics and some of the core aspects, let's talk through a little bit more about, well, what's the actual process to getting data out of your source systems and making it usable? I think as you become familiar with this, as we maybe talk through some how to implement this within your brewery, it'll start to make a little bit more sense. You can see the main steps there on the right. First, we get data out of the source system. Then we're going to transform it and enhance it. Then we're going to load it into an analytics software, and then we're going to analyze that data for insights. Okay, so I listed some of these off earlier, but the modern brewery deals with all sorts of different systems that hold different parts of your data. Most of them are in the cloud these days, which is good because that means the data is more accessible than if it was all stored locally. There's a few different extraction processes that we can choose from as we're looking to get data out of the source system. There's one that's most ideal, and that really takes the human element out of it, and that's being able to connect to the underlying databases that hold all this data. If we're able to do that, then it's awesome. We basically just have machines talk to each other. Things move really quick. No human has to do anything to get data out of the source systems. But with some of the cloud platforms we deal with, that's not always an option for various reasons. We won't get into those right now. But we still can get data out. It's just sometimes a little bit more manual, where either we have a standard report scheduled to run, or somebody has to go in and they run a standard report to get that data out. So it's a little bit more manual, but one way or the other, we can always get to the raw data that we need. Okay, so now that we have it out of the system, a lot of times it's not quite readily usable for us. So what we're going to do now is we're going to transform it and enhance it to make it more usable. So first we're going to clean it. A lot of times that's just making things more user-friendly, making names and groups of beers and stuff, something that you're used to seeing. Another thing we're going to do is maybe combine multiple sources together, and that's super helpful if you're thinking about all of your customer demand. Some of that's like your point of sale system, right? And the rest of it might be in your wholesale system. What I've seen is most of the time, probably, a lot of the part numbers aren't the same between those two systems. Maybe there's your different beer families aren't quite the same. So what we want to do is be able to combine those two together. So when you're looking at it in a dashboard, it's really seamless. And you're able to see for a single beer, what exactly are the sales for the point of sale system and wholesale, without having to scroll through different beer names and stuff. This is also where we start to add in a lot of our attributes and stuff, or maybe combine beers into different groups. And then finally, we're going to enhance it. So if we wanted to add any standard formulas or other dimensions, which then really give us some of those deep insights that we want out of analytics, we're going to do it in this step also. Okay, so now we're going to load it. I use Tableau Cloud. I will highly recommend it. I won't speak to all the benefits on this video. I'll have others that do, but it's a best-in-class data visualization and analytics platform. So what we're basically doing in this step is we're taking that data source that we've enhanced. We're going to push it up into Tableau Cloud. So then it's going to sit there. And then once that data source is loaded, we can hook up all these different visualizations and dashboards to it. And those dashboards will always be up to date based on the data that's in that data source. So on the right-hand side, you could just see a few different examples of some different looks at data that's all really connected to that same underlying data source. What's cool about that also is because it's all hitting the same data source, then all the numbers always tie out, right? So you don't have some analytics giving you one number and then another report giving you another number, because these are all relying on that same raw data that we've enhanced. Everything always rolls up together and is accurate. And then finally, as we get stuff up into these cloud systems, is they have really good ways to communicate out these insights. So either emails can go out or alerts. Teams can collaborate directly in these platforms. So they're great communication tools, and another way to keep everything nice and organized so you always know where to go to find the data you're looking for. Okay, cool. So now that we know the fundamentals of data, we know that it's important for us to use, and we kind of know the basic process of getting it out of your systems and into analytics, we want to talk about building a data culture within your team. And this is just as critical as all those other steps we talked about. You can see some of the different aspects on the right-hand side. So making sure for your team, they can get to what they need and they know how to use it. They're comfortable using it in decision making. The importance of always having quality in your data and integrity so people can trust it. And then finally, I think a lot of what makes these platforms cool is it's not just like you build it once and that's what you use forever. The power of it really comes from iteration and trying new things and implementing things that work and discarding things that don't work. Okay, cool. So the first step here is it's important for all your employees to know what data is out there and to know where they need to go for what they need. So it doesn't do a whole lot of good if you have this really great analytics system, but nobody knows how to get there, or they don't really know how to log in or use it. So that's kind of the first step. Then once people have access to it, they need to know the basics of it and how to use it successfully. So maybe an executive is going to use the data at a higher level than somebody who's making the real detailed decisions. So it's important for everybody in your data audience to know how to get what they need. And then as you're bringing new people into the team, it's important to onboard them accordingly so they know what the expectations are around using data. And then it's also good just to have ongoing training sessions to make sure everybody's up to speed and they know the latest and the greatest of how to use your data and analytics program. All right, so next up is we want to use this in decision making. Otherwise, really, what's the point of it, right? So the first is making sure your team is using it. So encourage them to use it. Expect them to use it. Challenge them, right? Make them, when they make a decision, instead of just going with it, ask them to kind of show their work. So what data did you use to come to this conclusion? And then that'd be a good opportunity to talk through it. And then if they're not using data, understand when and why. And if they're not, then action that accordingly. So maybe they didn't have what they needed at that point in time. Or maybe they don't know how to use it. So that's a good time to ask them why they didn't use it. And a lot of times they'll have a valid reason for it. And then that's something that you can go back and help them fix. Okay, so data quality is critical. So I'm sure over time people listening to this have used data that wasn't correct, or they thought it was and then they compared it to something else and they got two different numbers and it got real confusing and just didn't know what to trust or what to use, and it just felt like a waste of time and was frustrating. So it's critical to make sure we have data we can trust. Otherwise, people aren't going to use it in decision making. So it's important to build in governance into all your data, into your data programs. You need to monitor what's going on so you can catch when there are issues. Not everything is going to go perfect 100% of the time, but it's important to catch it right away communicate out to people that we might have an issue and we need to work on it. So don't use maybe today's dashboard, for the next hour while we're working on something, but really ensure that you have the best quality of data so people can trust it and use it in their day-to-day lives, and they know they'll be successful when they do use it. All right, and then we want your team to feel like they're owners of using data and analytics. We want them to kind of be entrepreneurs when it comes to trying new things with data and analytics, and then please reward them when they're successful, or sometimes even when they're not successful, but at least they've tried to do something differently. It's a great learning opportunity for them. And like I mentioned before, really the power of these platforms come in iteration. So maybe you build something, you use it for a month, you have people write down some things they couldn't quite do right, or some questions they still have that they couldn't answer with this data, and then you make it better. And it's just kind of this continual cycle of finding things that could be improved and then actioning them to improve them. And really the key is get things implemented quickly. Don't wait for it to be perfect, because things are usually not perfect. So implement it, start using it, and then work to make it better over time. And then while this stuff isn't super expensive, it is an investment. So sometimes you have to spend a little bit of money to make a lot of money. And I think that's really where the investment strategy is when it comes to data and analytics. Okay, so let's bring it all together and finish this thing up today. So I want to show you, just kind of walk through an example of what I call the art of the possible, just to show you what's possible out there as a brewery leader. Let's go back and quickly revisit some of those initial use cases, and let's imagine those breweries and their situations now having a great data and analytics program, and maybe how their outcome would be different. And then we can talk about some next steps if you're ready to implement a data and analytics program. Okay, so I'm going to just read through this one. You can read along with me. So imagine if your day was like this. So while your teams are still sleeping, all data is extracted from source systems, it's enhanced, and it's loaded into Tableau Cloud. So that's that basic data movement process we talked about earlier. All your dashboards have been automatically updated, and emails and alerts have gone out, so people know that day as they start to log in all the new insights they have in the business. Then maybe your team has a morning meeting. So by the time everybody's been to that meeting, they've already reviewed those daily dashboards. And people have pulled out different insights on either trends for the aspect of the business that they're responsible for. And they maybe already have ideas on what they want to action based on that data. So think if you were in this meeting and some of those ideas that people had really made a lot of sense. But you wanted them to develop it further. So you asked them to go back and maybe go a level deeper or two on the insights, or you asked them to spin it a little bit different. What's cool is now they all know exactly where to go and find those answers, and they trust the data, and you trust that they're doing it correctly. So by the end of the day, they come back to you and they've shown you their work, and you now agree with them, and you say, yeah, this is really good ideas. I'm confident that your conclusions are correct, and that by actioning these, we're really going to make the business improve. And you're able to immediately implement them. So now as you're driving home for the day, you're confident. Your team made the right decisions. You don't have, maybe in the past you had some uncertainty when you guys were ready to take action on something, but now you're much more confident in it. And excited to monitor the performance improvements that you guys will be able to implement. So I'm sure for a lot of people listening, that would be quite a bit different than maybe today how your team comes to decision-making process. And it really is an incredible transformation. And it's all due to a little bit of investment in data literacy, culture, and analytics. Okay, so let's walk back through quickly those different examples we mentioned earlier, and think through if they had used data and analytics, how much better their life could have been. So in that first one, if they started tracking their sales more closely, they would have noticed that a popular beer's demand is far outpacing their production, while other beers aren't moving near as fast. So now that they're armed with this data, they can quickly adjust their production to meet the demand more accurately. And as a result, they're reducing their storage costs associated with that unsold beer, and then also increasing the sales for their popular varieties. Then when it comes to pricing, if they had a better analytics program against their pricing structure, they could discover that certain beers, they can charge that premium and it won't affect demand. And other beers that are going to have to be, that are more price sensitive, maybe they're going to have to be more competitive on their pricing. But in turn, it'll really boost their overall sales volume. So by having a thoughtful strategy and then being able to track it with data analytics, you can see a really large increase quickly in your gross margin and your profits. Then on Brewery C, if they were understanding their customer preferences better, maybe they found that in their market right now, let's say hoppy lagers are becoming more prevalent. If they were able to pick up these insights with their data and analytics, they could experiment with this new product line in a couple different beers and then track how well they're received. And then the ones that do well, they brew more of and see the uptick in sales in turn. And then other ones, if they're not doing so well, they're able to cut them off quickly. And they're not just chasing their tail with brewing beers that aren't selling very well. If they were able to do that, that would reverse their overall sales decline that we saw earlier. And then finally, when it comes to supplier evaluation, imagine we have a good system in place to track supplier performance. So if we're able to identify the suppliers that are consistently late with deliveries, we're able to discuss the issues with these suppliers. And we might be able to work with them and increase their delivery performance. And we may find that maybe they're just not going to be able to, but at least we've identified that and we can move on and from those who aren't going to be able to improve. And as a result of that, we're going to be able to reduce the disruptions we have in our production schedule. We're going to improve our ability to fulfill orders on time. And overall, we're going to make our customers much happier. So I think you can think through how having some basic data and analytics programs in place would really impact these parts of your business, but really everything else as well, including financial performance, marketing strategies, really diving deep into different sales strategies and stuff. It can impact all parts of your business. Okay, so final slide here. These are some next steps. So first is understand where you currently are. Understand what your strengths are that you can kind of continue to capitalize on, and where do you currently have weaknesses. And then it's good to prioritize those. You're not going to be able to do everything at once. So start with the stuff that's a little bit easier to do but has a meaningful impact. And what's good about doing some of those first, that's kind of your low-hanging fruit, is it helps build momentum, and your team can rally behind it and get excited because they can see these quick wins that are also impacting the bottom line. So it's important to prioritize, though. And not all of this has to be figured out and done by your team. Some people have people on their team who are really good at analytics. Awesome. They can probably take the ball and run with it and develop a really good program. But not everybody's going to have those resources. So I would recommend partnering with a data and analytics consultant to help launch your program. And a lot of times once things are launched and people have used them with the guidance of a consultant for a few months, then teams are in much better position to take them over from there. It's really getting them off the ground floor, which is when a local team will struggle. And then by doing that, it really allows your team to get the power of data analytics, but still spend most of their time doing what they do best, and that's brewing and selling great beer. So I want to leave you with, don't wait to do these things, right? I heard a story one time where somebody wanted a tree at their house, and they said, well, I really missed the window to plant this tree. Really, 20 years ago would have been the best time to do it for me to get shade today. Well, what's the second best time to do it? And that's today, right? So don't wait till tomorrow. Don't wait till next month or next year to invest some time and energy and money into a data analytics program. Start today. Even if you're just making small improvements now, those will build up and compound over time. And you'll look back in the future and say, man, I'm so glad we started that program. Even though it started a little bit slow and was a little bit difficult, now it's paying off hugely in the benefits to our profitability and team engagement. So leave you with that challenge. Don't wait, start today. Okay, we did it. We walked through all the fundamentals of data literacy, data culture, and how to use it within your business. I hope some of that was interesting and you learned some new things. And more importantly, you're inspired to take some of those practices back and try to implement them with your own teams in your brewery. I went through a lot of it pretty quick, but I'd be happy to talk with anybody if you have questions or you'd like some additional insights or just a chance to chat and trade some ideas. Please reach out to me. My email is jeremy@centralcoast-analytics.com. Again, that email is jeremy@centralcoast-analytics.com. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.